everyone. Welcome to another episode of UX Pathways. And I have the pleasure of being joined today by Jon Yablonski. Jon, how are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you, Mark.
Great to hear. Yeah, you've had a very impressive career. I've read your book. I know you've done a lot of things, but could you tell our audience what is your current role in the industry and talk about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a senior product designer at a SaaS as a service company called Mixpanel. It's product analytics, which is essentially, how folks are monitoring the products that they're putting out there in the world and using a product like Mixpanel to really understand user behavior and data and then, of course, iterate and improve their product as a result. So it's a lot of data, a lot of kind of fast iteration, listening to customers, and shipping updates that keep them happy. Um, my journey really it's been kind of a winding one, and I'm quite proud of that actually. That was by design, I guess. So starting off as a graphic designer, kind of jumping into the digital space really early with the arrival of the iPhone and kind of the mobile web was really exciting and so I started my career in UX, really just building websites and mobile applications, and really just through this organic process of going from making beautiful things to really making things that work really well. And that was just kind of a natural pivot into user experience for me. And then picked up a lot of really great knowledge along the way throughout my career and in different industries. So I've been able to work in agencies, I've been able to work in automotive, aerospace, and now SaaS. So it's been a really kind of great journey and very dynamic in terms of just what I've picked up along the way.
And don't forget about that book you wrote.
And the book I wrote, yes. So, I think that, the Laws of UX book is really kind of it really kind of highlights one consistent theme in my career, and that's really how human psychology and behavior intersects deeply with the technology that we're interacting with. And really, the more we can understand about human behavior, the better we can build for human beings. So that was really the premise for Laws of UX. And I think that, looking back, I'm at, a little over 15 years into my career, and looking back, that's been a thread of consistency that has always kind of been there. But I've been very fortunate to be able to have the resources and the time and focus to be able to build something that has benefited the community at large. And it's my way of giving back to a design community that's given so much to me.
I love that, giving back. And I'd like to really focus on the intersection you talked about. And UX has always been kind of this nebulous thing, and we've heard many definitions. I know Don Norman coined the phrase, but how do you define user experience? And when you try to explain to somebody why it's important, what do you tell them?
I think that it really comes down to this core relationship that human beings have with technology. And I'm kind of like I romanticize that relationship because I believe in that ethos of like how computers can really augment human intellect and kind of amplify our abilities as human beings. Like I go back to Doug Engelbart and Alan Kay and just all these guys that are just the pioneers of computing and doing amazing work, and how that really kind of like has evolved into the space and the relationship we have with technology now. One of my favorite all-time quotes, I think it's by Jared Spool. It actually says, "Design is the rendering of intent," and I think that really echoes like what we're tasked with as far as being designers. And as a product designer, I'm really interested as a UX designer, product designer, I'm really interested in like what that means about like the products, the apps, the websites that we're using and how that is helping us in our lives, like helping us augment our human intellect or get a job done or synthesize more information to make a more informed decision. And really, our job as designers are really just to kind of understand why this thing should exist and how it should be crafted in a way that optimizes around that augmentation of human capabilities.
Like that augmentation of human capabilities. And was there a point where you first discovered that it was important? Was it in school? Was it during a project? Like when did it all come to fruition for you?
You know, I there's only probably a few moments in someone's career I think that they can remember something so vividly because it was a pivotal time for them. But I remember I was sitting in the Fiat Chrysler office over here in Michigan, and we were working on a vehicle in-vehicle interface system for the Jeep Wagoneer, and it was actually my first like big automotive project I was ever working on. And I was working more or less as like a consultant because I was at an agency at the time and was kind of dropping into the Fiat Chrysler office and working with their designers. The the kind of the situation was is that because I was an outsider, I was coming in, they weren't very receptive to like providing me a lot of user data in terms of like what people were doing in previous vehicle systems. So I was designing this kind of new system and having to propose changes that would challenge the previous system, but I had to do it without the data to really back that up. And, any UX designer is gonna, kind of know, well, we need data to be able to inform our decisions and then speak to that to like the stakeholders. But I didn't have that initially. So I kind of thought about it long and hard, and I recalled some of the psychology courses I had taken in art school and how some of these fundamental heuristics really could help to inform some of the design decisions that I was making. So I remember just kind of scouring the web and academic journals and just trying to find all the information I could around something that I could articulate back to this team that I was proposing all these changes to, and realizing that there really wasn't that resource I was looking for that was just really design friendly and memorable and glanceable, all the things that we would talk about in terms of like a good user experience. I couldn't find that resource that provided that for me and really honed in on the intersection of psychology and user experience. So I decided to create it, and that was the origin story of Laws of UX. And of
I
course,
love it.
it sprouted out from there and grew into lots of other things. I'm quite proud of it, and honestly, it's a project, a labor of love that I continue to evolve. So very proud of that one.
Yeah, that's a great origin story. And it's amazing how when you're in time of need, what comes out of it, which is
Yeah.
exactly what occurred here. And for you, talking about that, I mean, you've talked about your journey, how you've kind of evolved. How do you particularly adapt to change? I mean, are you one of those people that approach it from, it sounds like you're more hands-on, you want to go out and find information and but is there some type of approach you currently apply when you're moving around between positions or on a project? I know it's a
Yes.
hard question.
No, it's a good one though. I think it kind of it's it's a very reflective one. I think that if I was to look back and kind of think about how I've consistently approached things, I would say it's been from a place of deep curiosity. Like I come in trying to challenge assumptions, my own kind of knowledge, and really try to be a student of the topic, whatever that might be. So that constant learning mentality, I think, is really important to adaptability and change. And whether that's on a more kind of micro level with like a project or even a macro level with like you're zooming out and you're looking at your career and how where you want to pivot as far as skills go. I think this it's a very applicable mindset in general. And yeah, I think that the other thing is just kind of building on first principles. I'm a big fan of too, and I think that like the Laws UX project kind of really is based on these kind of first principles around human behavior and psychology, but being able to reason from first principles and then kind of interpolate out from there, I think it's a really important skill to have. And that can apply to really any kind of design work you're doing or building skills or whatever. You start with kind of where you're good, what your strengths are, you identify your weaknesses, and then you kind of work on those in layers, like a student coming into a new topic and building on subsequent knowledge already built. So I think that's just my general philosophy in life and learning and really work.
Yeah, it's strong. And what's I love that SWOT analysis, but it's interesting about principles. And it goes back to your book and knowing that humans do operate a certain way and we're attracted to certain things and the way technology intertwines with there. And there has been a lot of buzz recently. If you follow the Gartner hype cycle, there's always some new technology that's out there. For a while, we had blockchain and we had this or that. I mean, what is there a current hype in the industry that it's hard for you to ignore, or you've thought about how to merge into this world of UX?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the elephant in the room, so to speak, is obviously AI right now, and we're all
Yes.
figuring out how to adapt to the kind of dramatic kind of progression of LLMs and how AI tools can really kind of augment our abilities as UX designers. Um, I think, it's really easy to say, oh, well, AI is not going to really replace my job as a UX researcher or UX designer. And really, that's kind of the wrong framing. I think, it's not really replacing, it's really how it can augment to improve your kind of skills and being open to what it can do for you. um, I think is really, really important. So it's that adaptability of being able to use AI tools to your advantage and not as a kind of silver bullet that's supposed to solve everything, right? So, there's a good analogy that I like to use. It's kind of like the autopilot system that pilots would use in airplanes. And what they discovered is when the autopilot system started just flying the plane for them, their skills as pilots started to atrophy. And this became a big problem. There was air crashes that were a result of the autopilot system kind of failing, and then the pilot having to kind of very quickly adapt to falling back on their manual skills. But what they've discovered is if there's kind of that human in the loop back and forth between the human and the technology, it really augments the pilot's abilities, but then also makes them safer pilots because then they know where and when to rely on the autopilot system, and that just became integral to like pilots and how they operate aircraft to this day, right? Um, and I think it's just really important to think about that in the context of design because we really are at this precipice where AI has, it's a brand new frontier for us in a lot of ways, and learning how to adapt to these tools, bring them into our skill sets are really important. And, Ethan Mollick refers to this as the jagged frontier, and I think right now what we're doing is figuring out where the edges of the jagged frontier are, and it's important that we're doing that. We're out there building things and uh, and really kind of just exploring what it can do really well and what it can't do really well. And also keeping in mind that like the AI you're using now is the worst AI you'll ever use because tomorrow it's going to be better. It's going to continue to get better. So it's really not about replacing us, but more augmentation.
Wow, there's a lot there to think about, John. The autopilot, I love that because basically you're saying you're building a relationship. It's augmentation, but you're also learning together instead of it just allowing you to do everything. And I think that's been also a thread here about what you've been talking about, that you are still thinking about that interaction between the human and technology, and it just has to be there has to be some kind of organic substance there that they're living together, and that's great. And for you, I mean, you've talked about a lot. You've had a journey. So you've talked about that first moment that you realized you got to go and discover more, and it led to building your book and then moving through many different industries. What advice would you have for people looking for a career change or following your path?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I can't speak to like, wisdom that would, really kind of encapsulate all the things related to UX, but I can speak to what's worked really well for me personally in my career. And that's been one, write about what you're working on, write about what you've learned, build that muscle of being able to reflect back on your career, your projects, what you've learned, something novel that you're exploring, and just that ability to kind of articulate back actually strengthens your skills and your understanding of what you're experiencing throughout your career. So, yeah, writing's been a huge unlock for me in multiple ways. The other is just get out there and explore the tools, explore projects, and scratch that creative itch whenever you can. I think that tool building has been kind of central to like my growth as a designer. And, if it hadn't been for that kind of desire to constantly be tinkering on something and exploring an idea or scratching some creative itch over here outside of my job, I would have never created Laws UX or Humane by Design or really any of these other projects that have really kind of come back full circle and kind of fed back into my growth and my journey and the opportunities that have been available to me in my career. So I think, staying hungry and working on projects that will really kind of stretch you beyond just what you're experiencing in your 9 to 5. I think that's really important. And then lastly, we kind of touched on it, but it's just like that constant curiosity, staying very curious, staying a student as much as you can, never assuming you know everything, and just kind of coming in and really trying to learn constantly, kind of push yourself in terms of knowledge and skills and that kind of thing. So I think that's also, that kind of underpins everything in a lot of ways. It's just, that constant learning mindset, I think, is really important.
Some really great advice there, John. I mean, there's so much that I feel as though if someone were thinking about getting into industry or even apply to another industry, I could see how those kind of fulcrums of the way you've been able to move forward can just be applied to many things. And what a great way to wrap up today's podcast. I would love to just let our audience know is there where should they go to find out more about you and what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. I love having a personal place on the internet. For me, that's my portfolio website. So jonyablonski.com. Um, it's just where I try to use it as like a hub for all things that I'm up to. And so that would be a really great place to start. And then I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. So that would be another really great place to look me up.
I wish you continued success. I thank you for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thanks, John.